Hello! This is the exotic pulse rifle Outbreak Prime. If you want to know how to get it, please see my guide, since this is a rather long and complicated quest. In this video, we will be discussing how well it works in PvP and PvE, as well as going over any other relevant thing. For intrinsic perks, we have the Corruption Spreads. Enemies that take repeated hits from this weapon spawn Siva nanites that attack other enemies. Fallen take extra damage. This perk alone makes the gun just really strong for the raid. In 8 bursts, I could take down one of the Voltage Eaters. That's both the Siva nanites and extra fallen damage doing some serious work. Against the opening boss, I was able to get his health down by about 1/10 with just me doing damage. That doesn't seem substantial, but keep in mind that this is a primary weapon. The extra Sivite nanites will only spawn if you land 4 full bursts. This is going to be very much a PvE perk, as the only targets that will actually proc this in PvP are active supers or people with overshields. Even then, it does pretty poor damage in PvP anyway. The perk also only requires that you land 4 full bursts. It will proc on things like phalanx shields, immune shields, fallen catches. Almost anything that can be damaged will allow the nanites to spawn. Enemies also behave a little bit strangely when the mites spawn. Usually they will quickly move away from them, but still get hit by them. The perk also has the added benefit of being able to keep a shield from regenerating while you reload, so even if you aren't killing fallen enemies, it will still be hugely beneficial. For muzzles, we have Smooth Ballistics, increase recoil, boost to range. Accurized Ballistics, more range and impact, increase recoil. And Smart Drift Control, predictable and controllable recoil, penalty to range. Smooth Ballistics is out of the question in my opinion. The recoil pattern on it is just too unwieldy for use in either PvP or PvE. Accurized does have the benefit of upping the precision damage by 1 in PvP, but again, I'm not a huge fan of its recoil pattern. Smart Drift Control gives a penalty to range, so your fall-off damage will be affected, but it makes up for it with a substantial buff to recoil pattern. Use whatever you're comfortable with, but I found that Smart Drift Control was the way to go just for the consistency and predictability of it. Next up is Outlaw. Precision kills with this weapon dramatically increase reload speed. The final perk on this gun also has a great synergy with Outlaw. You want to land those precision shots for sure, and this rewards you even more. The base reload speed is also pretty decent, so it's not like you're punished too greatly for not proccing Outlaw. For the stat mod perks, we have Lightweight. When held, this weapon grants +2 character agility. Hand-loaded. This weapon is effective at an extended range, and Fitted Stock increases weapon stability. First off, I really hate seeing lightweight on exotic weapons. It feels like they just didn't want to risk having another good possible perk there, so they just threw in something that they knew no one will use. Especially since the other 2 perks here actually have a benefit to the gun. I ended up going with hand-loaded, since that increases the range of the gun. If you're using Smart Drift Control, you'll find that the fall-off damage is rather abrupt, so this helps extend it out an ever so slight amount. The other benefit of this is the bump in aim assist from the range increase. In PvP, this can mean the difference between landing a full burst headshot or landing a few shots on the body. It seems insignificant, but it adds up in the long run. Fitted Stock does increase its stability, but not enough to really make the gun a pinpoint laser beam. Pulse rifles love range similar to hand cannons, so going for a balance of both range and stability will help out with the consistency. If you want to try out a different muzzle with different range and stability combos, feel free. As a small side note, I really wonder why they chose these particular stat mod perks that are just so insignificant compared to the other ones out there. You'd expect something like Hand-Laid Stock for stability or Rifled Barrel for the range increase. Instead, we have some kind of throwaway year 1 perks that are significantly outclassed by other perks found on most legendary weapons. The final perk is Virulence. Precision kills release a Siva nanite swarm that attacks other enemies. This perk has a lot going for it. In PvP, depending on the armor level of your target, you'll do anywhere from half of someone's shield to 2/3 of their shield. They also have a pretty decent range too, and are very aggressive in tracking. Using Blink or Shade Step can cause them to lose tracking long enough for them to disappear though. Weapons of Light does not increase their damage, but a tether or melting point on the target will. The swarm will not go through a Titan bubble either. In PvE, the swarm does do more damage to fallen enemies, so it is entirely possible that they will kill some normal tier 1 enemies by themselves, provided they're fallen. Otherwise, the enemies will just take a little bit of tickle damage. These also do kinetic damage. No element is associated with them. The Virulence perk itself can only proc once every 10 seconds. The gun itself indicates this. If there's Siva stuff swarming around the weapon and the lights in the sights are on, then you can Siva swarm stuff. If the lights are off and no Siva swarm on the weapon, then you will only proc Outlaw when you precision kill stuff. I find this a little bit odd since every other raid weapon can chain proc their perk. My bet is it has something to do with the stability of the actual game itself. Maybe if there's too many Siva swarms existing at one time, then we'll get a big FPS drop. Alright, on to the actual discussion. I'll start out first with PvP since that's a rather short section. At its best, Outbreak Prime is a Hawksaw with a Firefly-like zone control perk on it. At its worst, it's a Hawksaw with a really mediocre roll that you would normally just dismantle. That's the simplest way to put it. The Corruption Spread's intrinsic perk is simply not going to proc. If it does, it's kind of a win more perk since that target is probably going to die anyway. Virulence is capable of doing some good damage, but the Siva Swarm only stays around for slightly over 3 seconds, so its zoning capabilities aren't really going to come into play much. If they kill something, chances are a weapon with Firefly would have done the job as well. If Virulence was able to proc more than once every 10 seconds, or the Siva Swarm itself stayed around for maybe the duration while it was on cooldown, then I could see its potential in PvP. But in its current state, I just can't recommend using this gun over a good Hawksaw or Grasp roll. Those are legendaries that don't take up your exotic slot and will be a little bit more consistent due to their higher range and stability. It still is a fun weapon to use though. Aside from the slow equip speed, everything else on it works really well. It's actually very satisfying to proc the Siva Swarm and see it damage someone. Outlaw is also a pretty rewarding perk for PvP since you want to land your headshots as much as possible. It's definitely not on the same tier as Last Word, Mida, or Thorn, but it's still a fun weapon if you have a category for that. Now, PvE is another more complicated story with no real definitive answer. The main strength of this gun in PvE is the Corruption and Virulence perks, plus the increased damage to Fallen. This is very much a gun that is meant to be used in the raid you get it from. It will be beneficial in every single encounter due to these perks. Is it worth the exotic slot in the raid though? Well, in my opinion, yes. Kind of. At least for a primary exotic slot. The only other weapon that I could see being on the same level of this gun is Zalo Supercell, and that's only in phases where you kill ads. If you're in a pinch and you need to do some boss damage and you're out of secondary or heavy, Outbreak will allow you to still pump out some significant damage to a high health target like a shielded major or a boss. I should be completely clear here. While Outbreak Prime does some seriously good damage to fallen enemies, I don't believe you should be running it over some of the other big damage dealing exotics like Black Spindle, Galahorn, or Sleeper Simulant. Those are built for the sole purpose of destroying health bars as fast and consistently as possible. A primary weapon needs to be able to work in more areas than that, so as such, Outbreak isn't in the same tier of damage dealing as those. As of this video, we also still haven't gotten some of the other raid weapons to drop. The interesting thing is that the pulse rifle from the raid almost seems like a better version of this gun. It has full auto and a perk called Sign of 4, where landing 3 bursts causes the 4th burst to do extra damage. Isn't that essentially what Outbreak Prime does? Hell, even the raid auto rifle has Firefly on it, which does a damn good job of clearing out multiple ads. Plus, all of the raid weapons have increased damage to Fallen as well. It seems like the one place where Outbreak Prime should be the king of primaries is actually where it's on the same level as some of the other legendary primaries from the raid. Plus, using one of the raid weapons opens you up to using one of those other heavy damage dealing exotics. In other areas of the PvE spectrum, Outbreak is still going to be a consistently good primary. If you're facing only fallen enemies, then I feel like it's a solid A+ listing. But you're better off using other weapons if you go against other enemy types. For example, I was really excited to try out using this against some Taken enemies. I was really disappointed at how little damage the Virulence perk actually did. Normally my scout rifle with Firefly will take out a whole pack of Taken Scions in one beautiful explosion. Outbreak's Virulence perk just kind of tickled them. This doesn't mean that Firefly needs to be changed. In my eyes, Virulence is the perk that needs a healthy damage bump in PvE to really make this weapon start shining. As a final note, I guess you probably want to hear if the weapon is worth the long, complex quest line. Well, in my opinion, no. At least not in its current state. For some players, that means you won't go through with the questline, which is a shame. I've been playing games for years that require some pretty complex quests, and the one for Outbreak Prime ranks among the top of them, easily. If you're looking forward to a journey, then go through with getting this gun, as it's a great experience. It's a fine reward to an exceptionally designed quest. If you're in it for the reward, though, then you're probably going to be a little bit disappointed. I hope you all found this weapon review helpful. I'll see you next time.